Alien generals laughed at the thin, dog-eared book titled Sun Tzu for Beginners, until one of them read 3 pages, paled, and whispered, "Do humans always think like this?" The galaxy was rarely quiet, but the Karth Dominion's high strategy chamber was unusually tense. War banners draped across the vaulted chamber walls, and holograms of entire sectors blinked overhead. A dozen alien generals, scaled, feathered, and armored in ceremonial plating, sat around the obsidian war table. At the center, bound by a curious glow field, rested a stack of old, battered books. The titles were in a script not native to any Dominion tongue, English. The covers bore strange phrases: on war, the art of war, unrestricted warfare, and even a dog-eared copy of something called the U.S. Marine Corps Small Wars Manual. General Threx, a broad-shouldered reptilian with ceremonial scars carved down his jaw, leaned closer to the texts. "These manuals," he hissed, "belong to the humans. Their strategists wrote them centuries ago. And yet, every battle projection we run with them ends unpleasantly." A smaller, owl-eyed alien clicked nervously. "Unpleasantly? Sir, our simulations collapsed in record time. Their obsolete Earth books predicted us, almost move for move. And I don't understand how humans were primitives when they wrote these." The chamber's air thickened. None wanted to voice the growing fear. If scraps of old human paper could tear apart Dominion simulations, what might humans themselves still be capable of? Then the doors whispered open. A lone figure stepped inside, human, tall, neatly dressed in a charcoal suit that looked almost modest in such a warlord's hall. He carried no weapons, only a leather satchel slung casually over his shoulder. His expression was polite, almost apologetic, as if he had wandered into the wrong meeting. "Good morning," he said cheerfully, his tone at odds with the razor tension. "I was told the Dominion was borrowing some of our old reading material. Thought I'd drop by to see how you're finding the curriculum." The generals stiffened. Guards half-drew plasma rifles. Threx narrowed his eyes. "You are the envoy?" The human smiled, inclining his head. "Envoy, tactician, occasional librarian. Depends on the day. You may call me Carter." He set the satchel gently on the table and tapped the nearest manual with one finger. "Funny things, aren't they? Thin pages. No fancy hollow diagrams. Yet, you've already discovered they bite." The owl-eyed alien bristled. "These writings map battle outcomes we had not even conceived. How is it possible? Were your people already dreaming of galactic wars while trapped on that dirt world?" Carter chuckled softly, a sound too casual for the stakes. "Dreaming? No. Planning. Always. Humans are fond of anticipating the worst. History trained us that way. Every disaster, every betrayal, every war, we wrote it down. We studied it. And we asked, what if it happens again, but bigger?" Threx slammed a clawed fist on the table. "You admit these manuals are weapons?" "Oh, General," Carter said smoothly, "they're worse than weapons. Weapons can be destroyed. Ideas spread. They seep into minds, reshape how you think. By the way, your simulations, we ran those too, centuries ago. We had names for them: the impossible odd scenario, the surrounded and outgunned drill, the nobody's coming to save you exercise. Old favorites." Murmurs rippled through the generals. The feathered Calarian commander leaned forward, his crest trembling. "And you mean to tell us your kind rehearsed for battles against foes you hadn't even met?" "Of course," Carter replied. His tone was still light, but there was something sharp coiled beneath it. "It's a human tradition. Prepare for enemies before they exist. Saves time." The generals shifted uncomfortably. Their entire empire thrived on superior numbers, predictable strategies, overwhelming force. The notion of an enemy who trained for every contingency before first contact was unsettling. One general, tusked and brash, finally snapped. "Lies. If your species were truly so prepared, you would rule already. Instead, you skulk and negotiate." Carter tilted his head, a mild smile playing at his lips. We learn something else from history, friend. Rule too loudly, and the galaxy unites against you. Better to be underestimated. Polite. Harmless. Nobody notices the knife until it's at the throat. Silence fell like a dropped blade. Carter tapped the satchel again. You see, these manuals aren't relics. They're reminders. Every strategy you think you've uncovered in them? That's the simplified version. The easy drills. You don't have the classified texts. You don't have the updates. What you hold are children's toys compared to what humanity keeps locked away. The generals exchanged uneasy glances. Threx's voice dropped to a growl. And why tell us this? Why come here alone, when we could strike you down and burn every trace of your knowledge? Carter leaned in, resting his palms lightly on the obsidian table. His smile didn't falter. Because, he said softly, that's exactly what the last empire tried. They burned our books. They buried our cities. And do you know what happened next? Their fleets stopped coming home. Their colonies fell silent. Their names are barely remembered, except by us. We wrote their downfall into the next manual. The owl-eyed alien shivered. You trap entire civilizations in your history? Carter met his gaze evenly. We don't trap them. They volunteer. For a long moment, the war chamber was utterly still. The Dominion's most decorated generals, beings who had crushed 100 worlds, were silent before a single unarmed human. Finally, Carter straightened, his politeness sliding back into place like a mask. Well, I should let you get back to your studies. Don't skip the footnotes. Humans always hide the good parts in the margins. He gathered his satchel, gave a courteous nod, and strode from the chamber. The guards stepped aside, uneasy, as if uncertain whether they were sparing him or themselves. When the doors closed, Threx exhaled, his scales rippling uneasily. Generals, he rasped, tell me honestly, do we study these texts, or do we bury them before they poison every one of our minds? No one answered, because every single one of them already knew the truth. They were hooked. And somewhere, in the silent corridors outside, Carter's faint smile lingered. The chamber was not meant for laughter. It was a solemn war hall of the Zarkothi Dominion, polished obsidian walls, banners dripping in ceremonial gold, and the heavy stench of oil-burnt incense meant to remind every officer of blood owed to the Empire. Yet, the air trembled with chuckles, hisses, and full-bellied roars. Alien generals, scaled, furred, and feathered, gathered in a crescent around a vast hollow table. In its center, glowing in crisp projection, was an old leather-bound book, faithfully scanned and translated into a dozen alien tongues. The title, The Art of War. General Grask, a reptilian brute with a voice like grinding stone, slammed his clawed fist on the table. Primitive humans. Their idea of strategy is poetry. Appear weak when you are strong. Ha! This is cowardice dressed as wisdom. A feathered general from the Aviary Confederacy tilted his long beak, eyes glittering. And yet, he mused, they won wars with these words. Entire civilizations bent to them. One cannot dismiss results. Results, growled Grask, are accidents. These earth creatures merely stumbled into fortune. Their manuals are full of riddles and contradictions. Deception is the essence of war. Tell me, how does one win battles by lies? The room erupted in mockery. Some generals slapped their armored knees. Others hissed, chittered, or cackled in disbelief. But one did not laugh. Admiral Keldar, older than most, his skin faded to a muted gray, studied the holotext with narrow eyes. His voice cut through the noise like a cold blade. Be careful, he said. They wrote these words centuries ago. Yet they still circulate. Do you not wonder why? Silence, brief but uneasy, fell over the war hall. Grask waved it away with a booming laugh. Because humans cling to nostalgia, old words, old superstitions. They are sentimental prey. When a predator keeps bones of its ancestors, does it mean those bones have power? No. They are trinkets. At that moment, the hollow door hissed open. And in walked a human. Colonel Nathan Hale had been invited as an observer, though the invitation, Keldar knew, was forced by human diplomacy rather than alien generosity. Hale carried no visible weapons, only a worn satchel slung over his shoulder. His uniform was crisp but unadorned, his step calm, his smile polite. If the room expected him to cower before generals of 17 species, they were disappointed. He moved like a professor entering a lecture hall, as though this hostile assembly was simply another class of overconfident students. "Gentle beings," Hale said warmly, placing the satchel down and bowing his head slightly. "I hear you're discussing our war manuals. Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, Machiavelli. Fine company for the evening." Grask bared his teeth, a grin meant to intimidate. "We were laughing, human. Your manuals are entertaining, but useless. Deception, patience, restraint, these are the strategies of prey, not predators." Hale's smile deepened just enough to sharpen at the edges. "Curious," he said softly. "Because every time humanity was treated as prey, it was the predator who ended up extinct." The generals shifted uneasily. The aviary tilted his head further, feathers rustling with interest. Keldar said nothing, only watched. Grask scoffed. "Empty words. Our fleets dwarf yours. Our soldiers are bred for war. What can your fragile species teach us? Do you fight with poetry?" Hale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "We fight," he said, "with the understanding that war isn't about who has sharper claws. It's about who decides the rules of the game." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a battered copy of The Art of War. Its pages were creased, its cover faded. He set it on the hollow table, right beside the glowing digital scan. "This isn't poetry," he said. "It's a warning label." The aviary general let out a low whistle. "A warning? Then tell us, human, what do your ancestors warn of?" Hale flipped the book open, his fingers pausing on a line. He read aloud, "When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard." He looked up, his eyes catching Grask's. "Do you understand why?" Grask smirked. "Weakness." Hale shook his head slowly. "Desperation. When humans are cornered, we stop thinking about survival. We think about taking as many with us as possible. History has countless examples." His tone stayed calm, conversational. But the words were knives. "Ask the empires who no longer exist." A ripple of discomfort moved through the assembly. For all their bravado, every alien present knew fragments of human history. How small armies held ground against impossible odds, how civilizations rose from rubble, how no predator ever left Earth unscarred. Keldar finally spoke. His voice was quiet but heavy. "You say these words are warnings. Then why share them at all? Why not keep them secret?" Hale's smile softened again, almost kind. "Because the real secret, Admiral, is that you won't believe them until it's too late." The chamber fell still. The laughter that had filled it minutes ago had vanished, replaced by unease. Then Grask barked another laugh, forced and loud. "Bluffs. Always bluffs with you humans. You speak like you hold hidden blades, but your hands are empty." "Empty," Hale repeated, raising an eyebrow. He closed the book gently, his hand resting on its cover as though calming an old friend. "That depends on what you think war is. To you, war is numbers, fleets, bodies. To us," his gaze swept the room, sharp and unyielding, "war is theater. Deception is the stage, patience is the script, and desperation is the curtain call." The aviary leaned closer, feathers bristling. "And the audience?" Hale's smile returned, polite and cutting. "The audience is whoever underestimates us." Keldar studied the human long after others looked away. He could not shake the memory of Earth's wars, battles fought with sticks, muskets, tanks, and drones, yet somehow always fought with a creativity that rewrote the rules. He remembered whispers of a phrase humans themselves used, total war. The old admiral wondered how much of the manual was theater, and how much was prophecy. The war hall dismissed soon after, though the mood had shifted. The laughter was gone, replaced by wary silence. Generals who once mocked the book now replayed its words in their minds like seeds that would not stop growing. As Hale gathered his satchel, Kelvar approached. "Colonel," he said, his voice low enough that only they could hear, "you spoke boldly. Perhaps too boldly. Be cautious. There are those here who will test your words." Hale's smile was polite, almost warm. Yet his eyes were cold steel. "I do hope so, Admiral. After all, what good is a manual if no one studies the practical exercises?" He left the chamber whistling, as though he had merely finished a pleasant lecture. But in the silence behind him, alien generals shifted nervously, their minds haunted not by the words they mocked, but by the realization they might not be jokes at all. The lecture chamber reeked of incense, an old-for custom meant to sharpen clarity of thought. Instead, the haze clung to every breath like damp wool. Alien generals from a dozen species sat coiled in disciplined stillness, though their unease was obvious. Flicking tails, vibrating antennae, nervous wing twitches. At the podium, Captain Elias Mercer of Earth's Fleet Academy stood with the relaxed posture of a man waiting for his morning coffee. His crisp uniform was clean but plain, deliberately unimpressive. A faint smile played at his lips as if he were about to deliver a comedy routine instead of a tactical lecture. The irony wasn't lost on the aliens. Most had dismissed humans as unpredictable opportunists, brash but ultimately primitive. Yet they'd come here to this session because someone had quietly spread word. If you want to understand victory, read what the humans write when they're bored. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted appendages," Elias began, his voice calm, pleasant, dangerously casual. "Today's lesson: ambiguity saves lives. Specifically, your enemies lose theirs." Murmurs rippled across the room. The insectoid Freyek commander tilted his head, mandibles clicking. "Ambiguity? In war. Clarity is victory." Elias's smile widened a fraction. "Clarity is comfort. Comfort makes you predictable. Predictable makes you, well, target practice." A low chuckle ran through a few of the alien generals, but others bristled. Elias turned a page in the human war manual he had brought, the paper crackling in the smoke-filled chamber. "Take this. If your enemy thinks you're crazy, keep him convinced." "That's not metaphor. It's doctrine." The amphibious Vark general croaked. "Madness is no doctrine. That is weakness." Elias glanced up, polite as a dinner guest. "Funny thing about madness. If your opponent spends more time trying to guess whether you'll burn his fields, kiss his daughter, or invite him to poker, he isn't thinking about how to win. He's reacting." He leaned in slightly, voice lowering. "And a reacting enemy is halfway defeated." The room fell quiet. The weight of his words hung sharper than the incense. "The demonstration." Elias gestured to the holotable beside him. A projection flared to life. Two fleets locked in combat. The alien officers straightened. This was their language. "Scenario A," Elias said, his tone light. "Fleet Alpha follows protocol. Clean formations, tidy maneuvers, orderly volleys. Fleet Beta? Human commanded. Sloppy. Erratic. Looks almost drunk." The display showed ships zigzagging unpredictably, formations splitting and rejoining, maneuvers that seemed wasteful and absurd. The Yix general scoffed, frills vibrating. "Chaos. They'd be crushed." Elias tapped the table. The simulation played out. Fleet Alpha fell apart, torn by ambushes they hadn't anticipated, reacting too late to patterns that weren't patterns at all. "Fleet Beta wins," Elias said simply. "Not because they were stronger. Not because they were faster. They won because they didn't give the enemy anything clean to measure against. And when you can't measure, you guess. Guessing gets people killed." A silence spread across the hall, brittle and sharp. The turn in the room. The Freyek commander rose slightly. "Your manual suggests deliberate unpredictability. Yet unpredictability breeds disobedience. Soldiers must obey. Elias's eyes glinted, but his voice remained warm. Ah, obedience. A noble quality, if you're polishing boots. On a battlefield? I'd rather have soldiers who understand intent and improvise within it. He leaned back against the podium, crossing his arms casually. See, humans train with, let's call it a healthy disrespect for the script. We give our people room to adapt. Because if the script fails, and it always does, we don't want statues. We want predators who can sniff weakness and pounce. The word predator wasn't lost on the audience. Some shifted uncomfortably. The VOC general rasped. You describe chaos as discipline. Elias gave a small shrug. Exactly. A glimpse of teeth. The session might have ended there, with polite debate, if Elias hadn't decided to illustrate the point with what the humans called a practical exercise. He pulled a small device from his pocket, no larger than a pen. A hologram flared to life, an exact model of the chamber itself, complete with alien generals in miniature. Gasps echoed. Now, Elias said softly, let's imagine this chamber was under attack. Protocol says, lock the doors, form ranks, wait for reinforcements. Correct. Several nodded. Elias rotated the model. But while you wait, gas through the vents, fire in the walls. Reinforcements arrive to corpses. The insectoid Freyek bristled. Enough theatrics. Elias's smile never faltered. Oh, I agree. That's why our manual says, first, break the script. Smash the windows, scatter, create chaos. Then, regroup, counterattack from angles nobody expected. His voice dropped lower, carrying an edge now. Because survival favors the one who refuses to die politely. For a heartbeat, the incense haze seemed heavier. A chill coiled through the alien commanders. They realized, this wasn't a lecture. This was a warning dressed as charm. The doubt spreads. When the exercise ended, the aliens whispered in uneasy clusters. Some muttered about human arrogance. Others, quieter, whispered something else. What if he's right? The Yix general turned to his counterpart. Their manuals read like jokes. Yet, their wars end in victory. The Freyek commander's mandibles clicked with tension. They are predators wearing diplomacy like clothing. We laughed at their madness. Perhaps we should not. From the podium, Elias closed the manual with a crisp snap, then spoke as if dismissing a casual luncheon. That concludes today's session. Tomorrow, lies that save lives. Bring a notebook. And maybe a stiff drink. A ripple of nervous laughter spread, forced and shallow. But as the generals filed out, none failed to notice the human captain's smile lingered a moment too long, sharp enough to suggest the joke was always on them. Elias alone. When the hall finally emptied, Elias remained at the podium, hands resting on the manual. His posture relaxed, but his eyes were steel. He murmured to himself, barely above a whisper, "Good. They're starting to suspect." He slipped the device back into his pocket, the model chamber vanishing. To anyone watching, it was simply a teaching prop. In truth, it had been something else entirely, an active mapping of every alien commander's biometrics, reaction times, and stress signatures. The corners of his mouth twitched upward. Data secured. Phase 2 can begin. Then, with the same calm cheer as before, he strolled out of the hall, humming what sounded suspiciously like an old American marching tune. The war chamber of the Obsidian Concord was never silent. Holomaps hovered across the room like a frozen storm, filled with fleets, arrows, and casualty counts. But tonight, for the first time in centuries, silence ruled. The alien generals, reptilian, insectoid, crystalline, avian, stood frozen as the human closed the last war manual. Elias Harrington placed the book down with the calmness of a librarian shelving bedtime stories. He adjusted his cuffs, smiled politely, and looked up at the galaxy's most feared commanders as though they were bright students after a long lecture. You've studied Clausewitz, Sun Tzu, Liddell Hart, and, my personal favorite, Sherman. Now, Elias said, voice smooth and steady, shall we review the practical portion of your education? The Chirac general, feathers bristling, leaned forward. You claim victory is assured against us? Our fleets are endless. Your Earth has but one world. One torch in an ocean of suns. Elias tilted his head. One torch is enough to burn down a forest, General. He tapped the manual lightly. And I've been kind enough to leave the matches. The crystalline warlord KLYTH rumbled, his voice grinding like glaciers. You are bluffing. Humanity does not have the reach. You rely on psychology, cheap intimidation. Elias' smile widened a fraction. Bluffing works only if the opponent doesn't suspect the truth. You, however, suspected too late. With a flick of his wrist, he activated the holomap. The alien fleet grid shifted. New red markers appeared, not in front, not flanking, but behind the Concorde armadas. Each one glowed with a familiar insignia, a blue and green sphere, crossed with a silver star. Earth. Except Earth's fleets weren't supposed to exist. The chamber hissed with confusion, disbelief, and fear. The insectoid admiral clicked her mandibles. Impossible. These readings are fabrications. Elias leaned against the table casually. No, Admiral. You see, you've been so focused on dissecting our books, you forgot to ask why we gave them to you. Why allow you to study every human strategy ever written? Because we wanted you confident, predictable, stale. The holo zoomed, revealing the phantom fleets uncloaking near Concorde supply lines, homeworlds, and shipyards. You've spent years reading our manuals, Elias said softly, but you never realized humans don't write manuals to preserve knowledge. We write them to mislead enemies who think knowledge alone wins wars. Strategy is alive, adaptive. We evolve faster than your bureaucracies can comprehend. The avian general screeched, wings flaring. This is a trap. We must alert. Already too late, Elias interrupted, tone still polite. We seeded your comms with decoys. Your admirals are receiving orders from voices they think are their own high command. By now, half your fleets are flying into ambushes, convinced they're reinforcing allies. A ripple of horror spread across the chamber. Elias' eyes gleamed with the warmth of a teacher who truly loved his craft. Remember Sherman's line about war being cruelty? He undersold it. Cruelty is obvious. What humans mastered is kindness, smiles, diplomacy, manuals. We give you the illusion of control while cutting out the floor beneath your feet. The reptilian general hissed. Why reveal this now? You could have destroyed us quietly. Ah, Elias said, straightening. His voice hardened just enough to cut. Because history demands theater. Your empires thought us primitive, fragile, amusing. I needed you to understand, fully, why you lost. Otherwise, someone would crawl from the wreckage believing humanity's victory was luck. It was never luck. It was design. For the first time, his civility cracked. Not rage. Something sharper. Authority. You studied our war manuals as if they were scripture. But we humans never worship scripture. We write new verses. We revise. Outside, alarms began to blare. The generals looked to the holomap. Alien fleets burned like torches in the void, consumed by surgical strikes. Human ships, small, efficient, terrifyingly coordinated, were dismantling armadas thought invincible. Elias closed the manual fully and tucked it under his arm. Class dismissed. The chamber erupted in chaos. Generals shouted over one another, voices rising in fear. The crystalline warlord tried to seize the map controls, but the feed was locked. An insectoid guard screeched for reinforcements, only to find her comm channel cut. Elias walked toward the exit door at an unhurried pace. Where are you going? Demanded the avian general. To watch the fireworks, Elias said lightly. Then he paused at the doorway. His voice dropped into a velvet threat. Oh, and to call my mother. She worries. The door sealed behind him, leaving the most powerful war leaders in the galaxy to stew in helpless rage. Outside the chamber, the station's grand viewports displayed the unfolding catastrophe. Massive Concord fleets, once symbols of dominance, were cracking apart under precise strikes. Every maneuver the aliens attempted was counted in advance, as if humanity had scripted the war like a play. Elias watched with a faint smile. His aide, a young human lieutenant, approached nervously. "Sir," she whispered, "is it really working this perfectly?" Elias nodded. "Of course. They studied how we fight, not why. And that's the fatal oversight." The lieutenant frowned. "Why we fight?" He clasped his hands behind his back. "Because every predator in the galaxy fights for survival, dominance, territory. Humans? We fight to make sure we never have to fight the same war twice. That's why our manuals read like history books. They're tombstones. Lessons carved from mistakes. Every line they memorized was us telling them what not to do." The lieutenant's eyes widened as realization sank in. "Yes," Elias said softly. "They walked willingly into the graveyard of our errors. And tonight, they join the collection." In the war chamber, the generals had stopped arguing. Some slumped into silence, realizing the inevitability. Others raged, unable to process the scale of betrayal. The insectoid admiral whispered, mandibles trembling, "We studied their words, but we never studied them." The crystalline warlord's glow dimmed. "And now, we study our own extinction." Back on Earth, broadcasts would later show the footage. The day humanity turned the galaxy's libraries into a trap and weaponized knowledge itself. The day alien empires learned that humans did not merely read war manuals. They wrote them to be studied, stolen, and misunderstood. Elias Harrington, smiling politely, would be recorded delivering the final line before the Concorde collapsed. "Congratulations, generals. You passed the written test. But you failed the only exam that mattered, the one where we graded you.